want to ask you, if you have an orange from a tree that let's say your grandma has on her backyard, and you compare that with an orange that's from the supermarket, orange there, you will notice, if you ever had that experience, if you know, not your grandma perhaps, but from the wild, how much better the taste is, how much more juice there is, the intensity of the smell, the color, everything is different. To the point where this orange right here and this one seem like completely different fruits. And now I want to ask you, for these beautiful oranges, were they better because your grandma or whoever was taking care of them put more hours into it, or was it something else? Obviously, it wasn't just the amount of hours. It was not just the effort, but the quality of the effort she put in. And obviously of the tree and of the soil and everything that contributes to it. Now, this is a simple lesson that I'm about to show you, but well, so is everything that works. Because so often, not when planting oranges, but similarly, when we're approaching the goals that we have, we think that if I'm moving there and now an obstacle appears, I think that the problem, or what I'm missing, is that I just need to add more complexity to it. And so we add more habits, more processes, more complexities to it. And we think that will work, but it never does. We just end up having to work a lot, be very overwhelmed, and a lot of times making very, very small progress compared to the amount we're putting in. And that's why I use this first example, because the more you progress, the more you realize that it's not so much about more hours and more things adding to it. A lot of times, the best thing you can do is not to add, but to channel the efforts you're putting in into the work that matters, the 3 to 5 habits that are actually bringing you results, and in that process, finding time, finding freedom to then be able to, in a lot of ways, what I call here a simple process that allows you to exponentially progress the more you go. Now, before we get to, why this whole thing here is the way it is and how you can improve, I want to first ask, and you should ask yourself as well, why do people tend to add things? More habits, more effort, more things. And one of the reasons is the perceived risk. Because we believe, and I also believed in the past, that if you just add, and I'm going to even move here, more complexity to it, somehow this goal will come truer sooner, or at the very least, you will stay afloat for longer. And so we do that. And you add, this habit in the morning, then this in the afternoon, and you work more hours in this one. And a lot of times you'll notice that you're really not moving that further forward. In a lot of ways, and I'm going to use another example here, it's almost as if you have a boat and you're in the sea. Let's say you're here. Nice, pretty little primary school boat, this being you. And what ends up happening is that we are in a boat that has a leak, and so water is leaking inside. And so a lot of our time is spent on just taking this water out to make sure the boat stays afloat. But because there's so much time spent on just, making sure this goes out, we then don't really have the time to think about and to strategize on how am I actually going to move faster forward? How am I going to make sure that this boat can be upgraded? How can I progress in the speed that I want to progress? And because of that, because we spend so much time here, no energy, no time, and overall we're working within a system that doesn't work. Because if it does require you to spend all your day, 10 to 12 hours per day, when will you find the time to actually think about what you're doing, to analyze the efforts you're putting in, to really critically look at what's happening and iterate on it to make it better? You're not going to have time. And when you do find the time, because I remember when I was doing things like this, I would find the time sometime. However, because I was so tired, so overwhelmed, I would just end up starting 5 minutes past, because you have to then solve problems that require your mind to work. You're too tired, you're not having the patience, so I would just procrastinate on it, delay on it, and I would essentially never get to it. And I wouldn't get to it, or when I would get to it, I wouldn't do it properly, because this is what we call a quarter, I believe it's quarter in English, to task. And these are the tasks that are very important, but they are not perceived as urgent. Quarter one are important plus urgent, and just for context, these will be things like, an important email that came up, a phone call, a meeting that has to happen. These sort of things, they're important and they're urgent because they must happen at that time, and usually it's like now. Someone calls you, you have to pick up now. You get a text, you have to reply now, or at least you feel like so. And quarter two are things that we're talking about. It's strategizing, it's analyzing what you did and seeing how you can improve. It's really reviewing everything that's happening, and a lot of times thinking of a creative solution to a problem, and really fixing the way how you're approaching things. And in the long term, these are the ones that are going to make you progress in ways that you can't even perceive. Because if you just focus on these and doing more and more of these, you will progress, but it's very linear and very, like keeping the boat afloat. If you are just doing that, but then you stop or slow down a bit, you feel like you're going to sink, and it just doesn't really work if all your time is here. Obviously, these are what we want. It's really going to be the things that give you that exponential progress, because you still do the important things and urgent. However, you find the time to then automate, delegate, and really just make sure the whole process is much, much better. Now, I say all of these things, but at a certain time, this was me, and I was frustrated because, especially with passive meaning, I was putting a lot of effort in, and I kept increasing the hours that I was working. So more and more and more. And because I was just so lost in that, and my head was just so down doing those things, I didn't realize that I was putting more effort, but really things were stagnant. The brand wasn't really growing, the revenue was the same, and I just found myself doing more to get the same things. And I remember at this time I was listening to a podcast. I do believe it was the Tim Ferriss podcast, a great podcast. I've loved it for a long time. But in the podcast, this guy was talking about that every time he would go from his home to his work, let me do like this, a big building here, it would always be on his bike going there. Weird bike, whatever. This is a bike, bicycle. And he would go and he would always try to beat his personal record. And no matter how much more effort he would put in, so every day he would just be kind of killing himself going to it, more and more effort, he would always be kind of around the same time. Some days would be a second faster, some days a second slower, but things didn't really change. And one day he got frustrated and he just decided, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy my way there. For the first time, he realized that on the way there were, the sun was shining, beautiful, saw some flowers along the way, some kids playing in the park, things that make you kind of look at life and be like, wow, I was really missing on just this overall great experience of enjoying my way to work. And when he realized that, so he was just kind of more cruising sort of thing. And when he got there, what he realized is that, I believe, if I'm correct, he was late by only 4 more minutes. In the overall context of it, all the effort he was putting in really wasn't paying off, because not only was he not getting there much faster, because then, these 4 minutes you end up kind of screwing, or not, what's the word in English, kind of, losing them anyway. You scroll a bit here, check an email for longer, that's 4 minutes. But he would gain in comparison by just slowing down a bit and enjoying everything around. Was what's the word again? It's like you can't put a price to it. It's like he was losing on life. And the same I then found was true for me, because I listened to this and it was almost like I realized there was a splinter in my mind, something I had to get off because things weren't working and I needed to change. And so what I did is let me go here. I looked at let me change here. I looked at really everything that I was doing, and that we're going to put here like I was doing before, and this being the goal, everything that I was doing. And what I realized that there was really only kind of 3 at the time. So we'll keep these sort of 3 things that I was doing, 3 habits that were really bringing most of the results. Everything else, I was honestly just wasting time because they were giving me a little progress, but it was inconsequential. So it really didn't have an impact, because the amount of time that these things were taking away from me was just too much. And so obviously some I couldn't just fully remove, some I could, some I automated, the ones I could, some I delegated, so I hired someone to do that. And then what I found was that I'm getting the same results, but now I have and I'm going to do here, so much more time. So much more time. It's like I earned my freedom back. But then a much better problem to have, but that comes after, is that I realized, so I would work, let's say here in the morning, and I would be very productive, but then around lunchtime, I would be like, everything's done, nothing more to do. And in the beginning, of course, it's nice, you just kind of chill and enjoy the afternoon, but at some point I realized I don't want to just stay where I'm at. I want to keep improving, I want to keep progressing, and obviously I'm going to use this newfound time to do that. And so what I filled this time with, it's very important because it's what you, in my opinion, you should fill it with as well, is this, the quarter two tasks. But more specifically going here, these are really going to be all the things that we never really have time if we're just working, doing all the time. First of all, it's analyzing, probably misspelled, whatever, analyzing everything that you're doing. First of all, you start with the high priority habits and really seeing, okay, am I being as consistent as I should be? Am I as focused as I should be? How can I improve this? Especially if we're talking about things that are very universal for any business, any really thing, like writing, speaking, or these things that you're always going to need. Very good to analyze and understand how can I improve on that. But something here that I want to focus on, because obviously we have limited time here, is the strategy that you're using. Because so often, a lot of people do this, I was doing it too, is like you pick a strategy, for some reason, a lot of times it's not that logical. You hear some video of someone talking and you just say, yeah, I'm going to do that. We stick with it. And even if it stops working, or if we're not seeing the results we want, we keep at it. It's like someone that goes to the casino and they pick, let's say in the roulette, they pick, very wrong, like one of these numbers to hit. And they will just keep going at it no matter how many times it fails. And it may work, you may hit it right away, you may hit sometimes, but eventually you will lose. Now here I'm not saying you're going to lose money like in a casino, but you're going to lose a lot of time, a lot of life, a lot of, more importantly here, a lot of progress that you could be making if you were to look at what you're doing. And sometimes, to be fair, you have the right strategy, but you're just not doing it correctly enough. You're not just, you're not selling well enough, you're not marketing well enough, you're not writing well enough. And that's fair, and these are things you should always do and improve on. However, a lot of people are just plain out using the wrong strategy, especially the wrong strategy for who they are and how they want to live. Because if you look at someone that's working 10 hours per day and that's working for them, but you don't want to work 10 hours per day, then their strategy is likely not for you. You have to understand who you are, what you want, and then you pick the strategy for that. But to pick the strategy and to think about these things, you need to find the time by honing in on the priority things you must do, removing, delegating, automating the rest, and then you can think about it properly. Then you have that time. Then you really have what a lot of us start entrepreneurship for, but we lose, your freedom. Now, all these things that I was talking about, this is especially having the time for the quarter two tasks is what I can attribute everything that I've been able to achieve, the success, whatever you want to call it, that I've been able to achieve, I can attribute to this. To just having the time and the mental health, perhaps you call it like that, perhaps the wrong word, but really that energy, that effort to be able to dedicate to looking, what am I doing, is it right, is it wrong, and really finding the right path before you put all the effort in. Because when you think about it and you look at, and people say this a lot, but there's people less smart than you, making more money than you, fitter than you, getting better results than you, and you think perhaps you're like, oh, because they're putting more effort in, because they're more disciplined, because they're more focused. To a certain extent, perhaps. However, when you think about it, we all only have 24 hours per day. You only have 24. And most people split it, 8 you sleep, 8 you work, 8 you rest. And even if you change this, so even if you say I'm going to sleep less, I'm only going to sleep 5 hours, so that gives me more trees, so then I can work 11, I have to do the math there, so I can work 11, and then maybe I take some from here, so then I add even more, so I can work 13. Even if you do that, obviously you're going to be much more tired. You're not going to be able to be super productive in these extra hours. And the more you do this, especially if you cut into sleep and other things, the worse you become in the long term. The less focused you can be, the more distracted you are, and overall just, you're cutting into your health. It's just a system that doesn't work. If everything that you are to achieve is based solely on putting more hours into it, it won't work. Obviously, you have to put work in, you have to put effort in. I'm not claiming here that you're going to work 2 hours per day for the rest of your life, and that's always going to be the case. Sometimes you have to work more, if a deadline is coming up, a new project, you have to put more hours in, and a lot of times these are hours that you want to put in. It's exciting, it's your goals that you're after here. However, we can't solely expect that just a pure maximization of these hours in putting into straight quote-unquote work will work, because it doesn't make sense. Because what happens too, if I move forward here, is sort of the law of diminishing returns, because so it goes something along the lines it's like a reverse exponential curve, where the more hours, no, sorry. Let me put here, progress and hours. So the more hours you work, the less returns you get for the amount of time you're putting in. People expect it to be, they would think, they would hope it would be something like this, but it's not, because we're human, we're not machines, and we have to act as such. Because, and one of the big reasons as well why we act like this is because ever since we're babies, I was going to draw baby, but I can't. Ever since a young age, ever since we're very young, we really thought that if you just put more effort in, you get better results. If it's a test, out of 100 and you're at 50, if you just study more, you can go to 60 and then to 70 and then to 80. And we were taught like this. And this works for games that have rules that have been created, in this case, based on memorization a lot of times, or just doing more of the problems, of the math problems, of all these things will get you better and better results. Now, in real life, this is true up to a certain extent, but a lot of times this is not. If you're at 50 and you want to go to 1,000, this won't work, because then you're going to be playing a game that limits you out of 100. And even if you're 100 out of 100, there's no more to get. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can say, it's not really like that, and of course, but I'm just making a point here that we really taught since at a young age, if it's not working, put more effort in and just reading the book and doing these problems, and it will work. But in real life, it doesn't work like that, because there's no real rules. And the ones that are, a lot of times, are man-made. It's just someone that created, your boss created for you, or this person created within this, very niche specific thing. When you look at it, I don't know, like when you started your business, if that's the case, there were no rules. You could do everything. You can do it through social media or in real life, and you can sell this or that or do a new perspective. There's infinite possibilities. And with infinite possibilities, just more time in some random process will not yield the results that you're after. Because even if you're looking at business here in an age of social media, a lot of people do the same things. So when you look at it, people have to share content, either that's free or paid, if you have followers, or if you're paying for the ads, then you have to sell something, and then you have to fulfill whatever you're selling. If it's something more like coaching, something like that, you'll have more fulfillment. If it's a course or just a product, less fulfillment, but then there's costs, but it boils down to you share the content or the ads or whatever, you sell whatever you have to sell, and then you fulfill on the promises you made. Kind of boils down to that. But because so many people, in my opinion, they don't succeed, is because they just start doing these things, but then they never take the time to kind of look at it from a bigger perspective and understand, but perhaps I also have to improve how I'm sharing the content, how I'm selling, how I'm fulfilling. And if you never take the time to sharpen the blade, it doesn't matter how much you fight, you're never going to win the way you want. And that's very important to keep in mind. And that's why, where were we? It's so important, what I'm going to say. Where were we? Here, to actually zoom in, please. Find this time. Find the time to sharpen your blade, to hone in your skills, so that when you go back into the arena, you're better. And essentially, I don't know if I said this before, but you make the impact per unit of time greater. The more you do that, the more you increase that, the more results you're going to get. The more results you're going to get, the more results you get. The better things become. And you do get them, not by investing more time, but by making the time you're investing more valuable. And just to finish, to kind of give you just the last bit of value I have here, you increase that value on the things that you're doing to get, more money, fitter, better relationships, whatever that may be. But then it's very important that you also dare to go higher. Because let's say if I'm making, if when I break everything down, I'm making $20 per hour. Or I sell my services for that amount. Low, but let's say I'm starting, that's what I'm doing. Now, no matter how much I improve and how much better I become, I could be the best in the world, but if I only charge this and I can't risk to ask for 40 or 60 or 100 or 1,000, then I'm always going to be here. Because a key to progress as well, that a lot of people seem to forget, is that you also have to dare to go for those things. And to dare, let's say, to go from 20, if I want to go to 100, for some of you, you'll be like, oh, but that's slow. But for some people, it's not. Or perhaps you want to go from 100 to 1,000, whatever it may be, you feel resistance. You feel uncomfortable. You're like, oh, but that's too expensive. Within my industry, it's uncomfortable. There's some people doing that, but you think, oh, that's not for me. But when you dare to go higher, a beautiful thing happens, and I want to finish with that, is that all of a sudden you're forced to become the person that is worth that amount, or that can do those things. And when that happens, it's when you improve your skills, your way of seeing things, and a lot of time when you're forced to actually look at the work, whatever you're after, from a different lens. Not one of putting more effort in, but how do I make my effort more valuable? I hope you enjoyed.